So hi everyone, welcome. My name's Hannah and I'm part of the SI London Hub team. So along with Joss, I'm facilitating today's session. Our session today is the co-creation on the topic of mental health and resilience in a turbulent world. And our aim is to explore the problem as a systemic challenge and consider where the possible intervention points within our system are. We hope that ultimately this will spark some collective thinking and show us where to innovate, creating better outcomes. Today's event is also in collaboration with On Purpose. They're a UK-based social enterprise working to enable people to have a positive impact in the work that they do. And we're lucky enough to be joined by a number of their associates who are also here to explore along with us what systems innovation means. So the session will be 90 minutes. We'll be using our leverage points canvas and working on a Miro board to map, explore and discuss the theme. The session is going to be live streamed on YouTube, so it will be recorded. Joss will facilitate the co-creation and he's going to explain how all of that works in a minute. But before that, we wanted to jump into a framing around the problem. So we invited a member of our London Hub, Angela Kennedy, to say a few words. Angela is the network lead for North of England Mental Health Trust. She's particularly interested in the topic of trauma-informed care, compassionate leadership and systems change. So over to you, Angela. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and what some of the most pressing challenges you see in mental health at the moment?
Yeah. So yes, I'm a psychologist by background and I've had my whole career in the NHS. Started working in 1990 in what was then one of the old asylums that was starting to open up with this new vision of mental health, that if only people are embedded in the communities, that everybody will kind of function a bit better. Of course, it was a little bit of a pipe dream in that, you know, quite actually what has happened is that we certainly have fewer beds, but also the reality of what it means to live with some severe mental health problems in the community is not quite lived up to expectation. So as my career has progressed, I've always worked with individuals who have been traumatized, often with a diagnosis of schizophrenia or dissociative disorder. But I also have interests kind of in arts, you know, personally. And I think one of the things that I've got braver in doing as time has gone on is thinking more holistically about mental health, you know, rather than just as individuals and in terms of evidence-based care, but what we can do as a society around it. So if I just kind of give you a few examples of the kinds of things that are a challenge for us in services. If you look at some of the population statistics around trauma, for example, and you ask people on a population level to fill in a questionnaire that just tick boxes how many traumas they've had as a child, and then map them against things like whether they're homeless, whether they have drug and alcohol problems, whether they're suicidal, whether they hear voices. We know that the risks of all of those things increase quite a lot the more traumas you have. But as an individual coming for help, that tells you pretty much nothing really about individual risk. Population level risks don't really compare well. And so what services end up doing is they usually try to develop evidence-based pathways for individuals, but then that's based on very kind of large-scale studies, and it's not always about then what is going to be most effective for this individual or what has caused their distress. So even at best, you know, our therapies can be about 50% effective, and that's pretty good. But then what about the other 50% of people? You know, how come we don't look at what it is that might be effective for them? So of the many things that do cause mental health problems, we know that, yes, trauma is one of them, but we also know that the support that you have around the trauma at the time helps to kind of mitigate against its impact. We know that in societies where there's greater economic disparity, that there's more mental health problems. We know that if you have kind of cultural traumas, or if you're an immigrant, you're more likely to be diagnosed with certain problems. So we know all of that. But when it comes to individuals, we need a much more nuanced and multifaceted way of healing. So you can look at people's biology, you can look at their kind of what's inside their head, their cognitions, or you can look at their relationships. But we also need to think about collective ways of healing and community-based approaches, because our Western view of the sense of self and mental health isn't shared by other cultures, and they often do better in relation to population mental health. If we stop seeing each other just as individuals and what's inside our heads, we might actually have better mental health in our societies. So we need to have better justice for people who have been traumatized at the hands of other people. We need to have greener spaces. We need to have greater equality. We need to make sure that people are kind of healthier and physically healthy. And I think in terms of collective healing, using things like arts and culture, music, those kinds of things, the best of our community assets to bring people together, because when we feel connected, that's when actually we function at our best. And I know certainly having dedicated my career, to helping other people, I have no doubt that that's also helped me to understand myself as well. So I think for me, I've got much more interested in systems thinking as time has gone on. Early in my career, when I was wanting to look at this, I was told to keep it out and that my career would go nowhere if I brought it in. I think people are much more open to thinking about it now, and I'm hearing a lot of other NHS leaders starting to say, yes, we need to incorporate things that are needs-led and how to think about complex system change. They're not always doing it. They're still seeing change in terms of projects and pathways, but the conversation has definitely started, and that's really exciting. So I think one of the things that's fantastic about conversations like this and other of the systems innovation that Joss and yourself are facilitating is that it's helping people like me to kind of frame our thoughts around this. And I think that's ultimately going to be much more help us to kind of create better ways to heal together. So that's all I was going to say, just to kick you all off. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to join you for a little while. As you can see, I have been pulled into doing something else, and I've also found a nice quiet kind of spot to join you for a while, but I will be staying for as long as I can.
Great.
So you.
Great. Thank you very much, Angela. Cool. So actually, I had a little graphic here I wanted to share. Actually, Hannah, could you make me co-host, please? Sorry, I lost that so that I can share my screen. I just have a little graphic here from Dark Matter Labs. Actually, they're an organization based here in London that do a lot of systems change work, and they've been looking at this issue also, right, and trying to think about the factors around that. They did this interesting graphic, a little bit similar to what we're doing today, but it's slightly different what we're doing, but it's kind of some of what Angela was touching upon there already. How do we think about this drivers of mental health in kind of a holistic way to look at all the different and relevant factors? Yeah, and I totally agree with what Angela said about the NHS. I think this is definitely something that's gaining ground there. The NHS is a very kind of traditional bureaucratic organization, 1.2 million people. It's the largest employer in Europe, private employer, I think, in Europe. But we have, actually we have some followers, a really big fan of ours on Twitter. It's Helen, I've forgotten her second name. She leads the Horizons team at the NHS, which is actually the change agents inside the NHS. And she's a big fan of complexity theory and systems change. And so I know in the NHS, there's definitely things happening. They're becoming more open to this way of thinking about things. Anyway, let's jump into our mirror board here. So could you share again the link, Hannah, for those people who have just joined? What we're doing today is a collaborative exploration on this challenge of mental health and resilience in a turbulent world. And we're going to use this canvas here to do this. So this is called our leverage points canvas. If you're interested in it, you can click on this link here and that there, and it'll take you to the PDF, what you see here on our website. So I'm just going to explain a little bit before we get started how this works. So in the center here, we're going to place our challenge. And then around that, we're going to look at the factors that are affecting it. The key factors that are affecting the situation. And we have 4 dimensions here, right? Social, economic, environmental, and technological. And there's different subcategories there, as we'll see. You know, social, we're talking about things like culture, behavior, education, governance, media, so on and so forth. Economics, we're talking about finance, commerce, jobs, employment, security, logistics, so on and so forth. Technology, this might be stuff around the built environment, energy, manufacturing, information technology, so on and so forth. And environments, we're talking about, atmosphere, food, water, so on and so forth. So those are the factors. And then out here, we want to post up what are the issues we're experiencing with those factors along each dimension, right? So what are the, if employment is a factor affecting mental health here, then what's the actual issue we're experiencing there with employment? The people don't have enough jobs, or the quality of their jobs is too bad, or their working conditions are poor, or what is it? We're going to post things up there. And then on the outside here, because this is thinking about leverage points, but leverage points are places we might intervene to influence and change this dynamic. So on the outside here, we're going to post up things around how might we influence that constraint, that limitation, that issue here to try and shift this factor and change the dynamic in some way. So it's trying to get creative and ideate a little bit about how we may, where would be good places and ways to intervene to try and change those issues. So that's the canvas, and it's here in the mirror board. And I'm just going to very quickly, I had 2 little examples posted up there so that to give you an idea of what we're talking about. We're going to do a little bit of color coding. So on here, hopefully you'll grab these light orange guys. When we talk about the factors, you'll find them over these ones here for the factors. And then when we're talking about the issues, we'll use these ones, and the red ones on the outside. So just a quick example before we jump in. I've got the challenge here in the center, how to build mental health and resilience to face the turbulent world. And then I posted up a sticky, one sticky out here, which is a factor, right? I think housing is going to affect this somehow. So I put that down there. And then out here in terms of the issues, what's the actual issue with housing? So I think it's lack of quality of space for moving around. That could be an issue affecting mental health. And then on the outside, I posted in, well, what can we potentially do about that? How might we better change that, influence that situation? That said something around repurpose underutilized car parking spaces, create parks and outdoor gyms for people to get better recreation and so forth. So that's an example. Also another one up here. Another factor I've put in, I think media, mass media could be one. What's the issue? I think excess of entertainment content. What would be a good response to that? How might we create better media content that helps people make better sense of the world around them and the changes that are happening? That would help them better respond to a turbulent world and better understand it, and hopefully have that maintain better mental health. So those are examples, and just one little thing I want to touch upon there is that these ones here are the factors, sorry, in this circle here. We're going to start now in this circle here, posting up stickies around the factors. And just a note there, please put the factors, these are just things that are affecting that situation. Don't try and put down the problems or the issues, right? So as I said, you might have employment here, and that's a factor affecting this, but you wouldn't have underemployment, or you wouldn't have lack of employment, because that's an issue with employment. So you'd have that out here. So just to start with, we want to post up what are those factors affecting this situation. As I say, economic ones up here, social ones over here. I'm trying to spread them out a little bit. Environmental down here, technological over here. So everybody understand? Anybody need help? And please, yeah, these ones are going to be the orange ones, as you see there. Please grab one on the side, or you can create a sticky for yourself here by clicking it here. Anybody needs help? Everybody know what we're doing? Feel free to jump in and start posting up. And in terms of the scale of your stickies, try to keep them the same scale that we have. But if you think a particular thing is quite important, then scale it a little bit bigger. And another thing not so important, you can scale it a little bit smaller. It'd be nice to get that kind of scaling as a way of structuring it. So we'll take a bit of time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes to do this, so that we can really consider these and try and find as many as possible. And as I say, as you go along, think about kind of scaling. If you think something's very important, a little bit larger, not so important, a little bit smaller. And try to stick to just the factors, not the actual problems, because we'll get to those afterwards. So also, if you believe there are connections between different things here, you might like to draw those connections in. You can just click on the sticky, and then you can pull out an arrow like this, and you can connect it to another thing like that. So if you think there's a strong connection between those things, like income and employment, there's obviously a connection there. So if you want to do that, okay, we'll just take a couple more minutes and then we'll take a look at some of these and have a discussion about them. Okay, let's take a look at what you've posted up here. Feel free to stay posting if you still have ideas, but I'm going to start looking at these and having a little discussion about this. So, lack of exercise. Anybody want to talk on that? Lack of exercise, obviously an important one. How do you think that affects your mental health? Any ideas on that?
I didn't add it in, but lack of exercise and lack of access to areas in which one can carry out exercise in a healthy way, so like a park or an outdoor space, limits access to endorphins and to general stable health.
The kind of chemistry, I guess, in your brain is part of what you're saying. Yeah, for sure. And also kind of a sense of space too, isn't it? When you move around, you walk or something, you have a sense of kind of space and you're processing information, visual information and kind of spatial information, which activates a certain part of your brain. When you're not, you lose that. Okay, a broader awareness of real wicked challenges. Broader awareness of real wicked challenges. Anybody want to talk on that?
That was me. I think in short, even in what we were talking about today, there's a lot of wicked challenges that we're dealing with as a society and as a species. And that can sometimes just be overwhelming, just being aware of all of it.
Yeah, and trying to sense making, isn't it? Trying to make sense of things. I guess that's the challenge. When things change in your environment in quite fundamental ways, like this COVID pandemic, a lot of the kind of the assumptions we had about the way the world works and what our everyday life would be like and what world would be like going forwards change very quickly. And then you've got to make sense of things again, don't you? And that can, if you can't make sense of the world and what's going on around you, then that can lead to a lot of instability and kind of lack of structure that's required to really function. And I think sense making, isn't it, Mark? Is that part of that?
Yep, I definitely think so. Which paradoxically, as you start to get into systems thinking, at least my experience was, it started out being really exciting and at some points it's felt overwhelming as I try to make sense of what I would do with it. So yeah, very much.
Okay, and it's the complexity of these issues too, isn't it, that we feel a bit overwhelmed by very complex issues. Okay, so trauma inherited from family members with mental health issues. Anybody want to talk on that?
That was actually mine. I was kind of thinking of the vicious cycle. You know, I think Angela touched on it. It's like if you're coming from a family where there's trauma and then that's passed down and it just recreates itself and manifests in like different ways. So it's a cycle of mental health.
Yeah, is Angela still with us? I'm not sure if she is. That's obviously the area she's interested in. But yeah, it's the way we, I mean, families, obviously they perpetuate these things, don't they? In the way we raise our children and the family dynamics and so on, and they get passed from one generation to another. Okay, family structure, healthcare provisioning, availability of childcare, multiple long-term health conditions, stigma around expressing emotion. Anybody want to talk on that? How do we think that affects things? Stigma around expressing emotions. Any ideas?
I didn't write that, but I mean, I think if you have, I wrote one on vocabulary and language also. I know we've been doing some work with kids in school about mental health issues, and also it's been hard for example, we've seen from men to talk about emotions also. So that how can we kind of reduce the stigma and increase the vocabulary? I think it's been, if you don't have a language, you can't address it.
And if you can't address it, then you can't have other people help you make sense of it too, isn't it? If you can't talk about it, because talking about a lot of things can help other people help you. And if you can't talk about something, then other people aren't going to be able to help you. Conversations are ways that we make sense of things too, isn't it? I think there's only so much we can make sense of in our head before we need to have a discussion with someone else who can help them make sense of it, particularly when it's dealing with mental health, which is a very subjective thing. So you're trying to understand yourself, your own issues, so it gets very difficult, doesn't it? And being able to talk about this stuff is going to help a lot. Okay, sleep. Emotional regulation is not easy. Lack of holistic understanding of mental health. Anybody want to talk on that?
I didn't write that one either, but I'll jump in because I think the term mental health can be defined in so many different ways. And I think the term mental health also has a negative connotation for many different societies and communities. And so to really understand what mental health is and how it can be sort of normalized across communities and even understanding of it will be helpful.
Okay. Okay. Schooling systems, media, I think I put that. So what do you think school, how does school affect this? Anybody?
I'll jump into, I didn't write that one either, but school for me, I have a point of view, of course, of schooling because it's a very structured, one size fits all type of environment. And that doesn't fit various different learning styles of children or even adults, let's say, but I'm just going to focus it on children. And so, especially in this sort of pandemic as well, it even makes it even more constrained. And so how does it allow kids to navigate with their teachers, with the school staff, and just try and normalize things? So it's a constraining system for me.
Yeah, it could be a space where it's really preparing students, isn't it? Sorry, do we have background noise here? What? I'm not sure where that's coming from. Is everybody muted?
Yeah, I think I know what it's
Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Maybe should we just maybe if we log off and log back on, would that help? I'm not sure.
No, it's Daniel. I keep muting you, Daniel, and you keep coming off of mute.
Okay.
So
Actually, maybe to kind of break this up a little bit, we might like to start posting here in this section on social sector some of these issues. You might like to start posting up here. What are the actual issues around those? We might be able to kind of iterate through it a little bit and break things up. So maybe jump back in and start posting there. What do you think are the issues affecting these here? Class, social media, so on and so forth, school and so forth. And then we'll come back and take a look at those. Remember to try and draw the lines in. So if you think there's a factor here, what are the issues associated with in terms of the factors here? So maybe I could find an example. So access, asymmetric access to education is obviously to do with schooling, schooling system. So if you could put those in so that we can try and trace it through. Okay, I'm just going to take a look at some of these. Feel free to stay posting, and just want to take a look at what we've got. So starting down here, limited dialogue, right? So that goes to the fact around stigma around expressing emotions, right? So that's kind of what we said. Lack of dialogue is going to create a problem. It's going to be the problem there. Okay, stigma connected with mental health with as perceived as weakness. Yeah, okay. And that's again related to expressing it. So social media companies comparing your everyday to other people's highlight reels. Okay. Schooling system not focused on life skills for today, the future. Or is it, I don't know, is the thing about making sense of the world too? Does it really help us make sense of kind of today's world also? Isn't that kind of part of it? Anybody want to talk on this? It's we've got a lot of issues around schooling here. The class system, lack of social mobility, closed social networks, entrenched power structures. How do we think entrenched power structures affects things?
I added entrenched power structures, and in my mind, I also connected it to a posted about challenges with legal structures, and I think that it makes it difficult for systems to course correct because entrenched power structures don't voluntarily relinquish their power. So it makes it difficult to create balance within systems and create necessary changes, be they through legal, policy, or even social avenues.
Imbalances build up because of lack of mobility, and that can lead to different forms of poor mental health. Okay, private education, class system, conservative government, wealth inequalities. How do we think? Well, let's put wealth inequalities over on the economic side there. Take a look at a few more factors here. Politics, expression of emotions, communication, stigma, mental health, okay. Rural separation from urban power centers, economic disenfranchisement, multiple ACEs. Rural separation, someone want to talk on this? Well, toxic environments at school and work. Yeah, could be things around bullying too, or yeah, different forms of stigma. Someone want to talk on that toxic environment at school and work?
I actually wrote that, and I think it's currently being really highlighted with all the work on safe and brave environment. And I think it's one of the key things that shows it is the level of burnout or harassment issue right now, which are kind of stigma linked to all these not undealt issues of toxic environment.
At work, you're talking work and school?
Yeah, and for school, I was thinking about bullying issues. And you also have the same kind of power dynamics and not handling well conflict or different worldviews, whether at school, when you learn it young, or at work after. Yeah,
so it's kind of like tensions and conflicts, I guess, are not played out very well, are not resolved very well. And then the individual maybe has to deal with them, and that creates a lot of kind of tension and anxiety inside that can be expressed as mental health. Do you think that's part of it?
Yes, I think so. I think we often talk about mental health as an individual issue, but when you see that, for example, connectedness and belonging plays a big role, I think mental health should be dealt with also as a collective issue.
Yeah. Well, maybe you'll have some ideas afterwards when we get to that stage of ideas around how might we deal with it at a collective level. Okay, neurodiversity, deeply flawed legal systems, inability to communicate with people holding different values. Yeah, I mean, I guess it gets to kind of multicultural societies too, and fragmentation, disintegration of society and loss of identity can be part of it. Also, nihilism, meaning crisis. What's my purpose? Yeah, loss of identity, loss of social, loss of kind of meaning and purpose. Anybody want to talk on that? If there's any of these, any things that you think are particularly good, you can click on it and then hit the emoji. And if you want to vote it up, you can put a little thumb there. I think there's a thumb somewhere. There we go, a thumb. If you like it, then maybe we can scale them according to the likes, if they get enough likes. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things you have on the outside here too. So inequality, inadequately trained teachers, pressure to pass academic tests. Yes, we've got one on standard tests here, feeding back to education, teacher training, personal leisure time. Anybody want to talk on that? Do you think it's very important, or? Kind of de-stressing, maybe?
I'll speak to that one. I guess it's a lot around, it's a luxury and it's a privilege to have personal leisure time, because it kind of links to economic inequality as well, where people are having to work several jobs because they're not being paid enough, or also things, people looking after children. And it's such an important thing with being able to exercise, being able to take time for yourself, relax, get mental health support if you need it, and just think even.
So stress is a big part of this, isn't it? And what you're saying is that stress can be there structurally in the economic and social systems, where certain people are having much more stressful environments because of more work, because of difficult economic conditions, and that's creating the context for greater stress, and then that can lead to greater risk of poor mental health. It's a good point. So it kind of illustrates how connected kind of everything is, isn't it? That economic inequalities can lead to these challenges that people face with mental health, or inequalities in that. Some people can get this leisure time, it's a lot easier for them, and they can afford psychologists and all these other things. It's going to be a lot easier for them. Okay. Pressure to pass academic tests, inadequately trained teachers, asymmetric access to education, different chances in education depending on class and income. Challenging conditions for providing teachers with adequate training for teachers to learn, patriarchy. How do we think this affects things? Anybody want to talk on that?
I put that in there. I just think well, aside from the obvious issues with equality, I think that there's an imbalance in society and how we in the lens that we view society through, and it causes lots of problems. It's hard to be balanced personally when you live in an unbalanced society. Yeah,
so the word balance has come up quite a bit, isn't it? I mean that's what health and mental health, that's what physical health is, kind of balance in your body, and mental health is a bit similar, kind of balance, psychological. And then we're kind of saying that imbalances out there in society will create, induce, lead to imbalances in our psychology. Am I kind of generalizing it too much? Is that part of what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of.
And patriarchy is one of those imbalances. Okay. Lack of, okay. So maybe we should stay going for the sake of time. Neoliberal values. Socio-political polarization. Yeah, political polarization. Incentives for media companies and content producers. Yeah, to get us stay clicking on things and looking at screens for longer and longer, and clickbait and all of this. Anybody else want to talk on that?
That was me. I think in short, we sort of have an understanding that media that's going to be more polarizing or angering is likely going to sort of come to the top. So there's almost like at the level of evolutionary principles, media that's going to further polarize us is the stuff that's going to survive. So it's more likely that media companies or platforms and content producers are going to go in that way or that direction, which means it's more likely we're going to be consuming that.
Yeah, and it creates the kind of bubbles too, doesn't it? Like if you search for something, a particular theory or idea, it's kind of like the algorithms keep on presenting more of that to you and keep on leading you down that pathway, and not necessarily providing a kind of balanced content and perspective and so forth, which is part of it. And the other thing is the kind of being in certain social networks, you get echo chambers and the algorithms just giving you kind of what your friends are saying, who are probably pretty much like you, and ending up in echo chambers. You can get all sorts of kind of crazy conspiracy theories like QAnon and all of this, which are kind of a collective kind of insanity to a certain extent. And those networks seem to kind of perpetuate it, and not really, we haven't really figured out how to design it in a more balanced, better way. And we don't, I guess those companies don't really have the incentives very much to do that either. So food security diminishment, increasing suicide rate, environmental damage, excess of environmental excess of entertainment content. Environmental damage, how do we, anyone want to talk on that? How does that affect things? Should probably be down.
That was me. I'm connecting that down to my issue below about separation of rural communities from urban communities. They were basically putting so much pressure on our rural communities that we could almost be accused of being, abusive to them. And I think that we're affecting our overall food system as well. We're leaving our food system to corporate industrial farming. But while we're doing that, we're seeing increased suicide rates in rural communities. We're seeing those communities fall apart, and we're obviously seeing greater political polarization since so many of those rural communities are now supporting Trump. So,
so yeah, the American perspective, but it's true in many different places, isn't it? Disintegration of rural communities, and that takes away the kind of support, the social context, and so forth. It's going to create challenges.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vicious circle.
Yeah. Okay. Jobs. Now we're in the economic sector. So job instability, employment, income are going to be factors here for sure. Excessive competition, access to dollar, access to self-care and development. Yeah. So these kind of financial and economic inequalities are going to kind of be replicated in this situation. You haven't got the time and money to, and the leisure, as we said, to look after yourself. Wealth disparity vis-a-vis healthcare options. Yeah, democracy, income, wealth distribution, cost of living and affordable healthcare, capitalism, investment, dependency. What do you think this, anybody want to talk on that? How do we think that's affecting things? Dependent on your job. What sort of dependency are we talking about here? Or does anybody want to jump in on this, these kind of work-related factors? How do we think that's kind of playing into it?
I didn't write it, but I think it's probably quite well linked to a sense of identity. Like we have this story that you have to have the job and be successful. And, if you're not in that game, you're kind of, that's your whole identity and, self-worth impacted. It leads to a mental health problem.
It's many things through identity. Many things lead back to health, don't they? Because so many things are tied up. Your identity kind of your identity is your place in the world, I guess. How you make yourself to yourself and the kind of environment you're in and how you fit into that. And that's kind of affected by everything, your job and, your race and ethnicity and your physical context. And then that's linked into mental health, isn't it? If your identity is disrupted or transformed in some way, that's really going to affect your mental health, isn't it? So all these things kind of play into it.
And I would say identity is complex too, because you've got so many different roles in your life, and work overpowers. But then let's say you're a parent, or let's say you're a sibling, let's say it's son or daughter, and then there's friends. And so trying to navigate the world today, especially with the pandemic, is difficult, challenging, let's say.
Yeah, when those things are moving, and if you haven't built the resilience to adapt to having those things move, I think that really goes back to your point about schooling, and I think that becomes so relevant here, doesn't it? Particularly when the world's changing out there, children, rearing them, that's going to be really a key thing, isn't it, for them to be able to build that adaptive capacity to be able to respond to those. And that's going to be a real systemic thing in educating them. It's not going to be like one little class. It's actually going to be kind of about the whole experience of rearing them and educating them and so forth to be able to deal with. I guess we're getting more, like we're talking about it more and more, that the jobs they're going to have probably don't exist yet, and they're going to have to keep on reinventing themselves in terms of the jobs. But that's just one dimension, isn't it? I mean, a lot of things are changing here. So how do we develop that adaptive capacity in young people to during, and that's obviously going to develop during their education, because that's their whole childhood and so forth. So it's really key, actually. Instead of teaching them all calculus and stuff, maybe we should be teaching them adaptive capacity and resilience and mental health and so forth. Okay. Sickness leave, creates poor financial situation. Yeah, okay. So out here, what do we have? I'm conscious of time, so I still want to get to the next circle. Let's take a look at some of these. Tax loops, okay, unstable employment or unemployment. Yeah, it can create stress, kind of. You don't know where your money's coming from tomorrow. You don't know if you're going to have your job and so forth. It all different dimensions of stress kind of build up. Funding inequalities in education, political and social apathy or racism, inequalities of information and knowledge around financial instruments, etc., saving pensions. Yep. Difficult knowing how to affect political priorities, lack of education, growth at all cost. How do we think that affects things? Anybody want to talk on that?
I'm going to jump in really quickly. I didn't add any of those, but I do think that the growth at all costs is a really fascinating note there. And one of the things, especially sort of within the workplace context, that I think is interesting to think about is when company growth is more important than the value of a person's human life or well-being or their ability to see themselves or their family thrive, then I feel like that creates a really difficult dynamic whereby the entity of the individual and their sustainability is at odds with growth at all costs. So really it becomes almost a question of like the business of the world versus the business of an individual. And I think that we've skewed in the direction of, and this is from the US, right? I'm based out of New York. But I think that becomes a mental health challenge, because at the heart of it, in some ways, what we are saying is you as a human do not have as much value as the success of this company. So putting those two.
And then you're not really going to invest in the kind of infrastructure of your employees, the social and psychological infrastructure, are you? And I think it's also, talking of New York, it's maybe also a thing of competition, a culture of competition too. I think we play into stress and so forth, but I think there's other dimensions to it also. Okay, let's stay going. All right, so those were some of the economic ones. A lot of them were leading into capitalism, right, and income. And I think certainly this has helped to highlight for me how structural inequalities throughout society and economy actually play into this. I wasn't thinking in that way before, to be honest. I wasn't sure personally the connection between that, but I start to see it more now, that how that's replicated, how those structural inequalities in economy and society are actually replicated when it comes to mental health pretty clearly. Let's stay going. So down here, we're talking about technology. We've got stuff around social media and devices and screen time, unequal access to technology, digital presence being always available online. It's also this kind of non-linear thing, you know, the way I've got 10 tabs here open, I normally have about 20 open, and you keep on flicking between them and flicking between devices, and it's like everything gets chopped up, doesn't it, into little bits of 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute, and then there's another little pop-up that says go over here, and another little pop-up that says go over there, and everything gets kind of dissected, and you find it difficult to find just a period of time when things are just kind of left to flow, should we say. So I think I experience that as a psychological stress. I think it's something maybe other people would like to talk about this. I think it's something that we can, to some extent, adapt to. I think it's something that we have to learn. I think it's part of the new reality, and to some extent, we have to learn and adapt to it. Anybody have opinions about that? Is this a bad thing that we live in this kind of non-linear world, or do we have to adapt and learn how to deal with it?
I think it's possible to adapt, but it has to be like a mass adaptation, because there's no point you setting hard boundaries with like your screen time and stuff if you're, for example, your employer expects you to be online all the time.
I think that's a great point, and I think adapting has to come with boundary setting and sets of shared expectations. And so in some ways, what I see is you can try to change the boundaries in one place, but if people are not receptive to it, then it means trying to attract other folks who have similar boundary setting expectations.
And anybody have opinion? Sorry, does someone want to speak now?
I'm done, thanks.
Okay, does anyone have an opinion about what this does to you psychologically? What do you think the effect of this kind of non-linear, chopped up, different screens and different messages all the time? How does that actually affect mental health? Overwhelming stimulus, right? That's what one person is saying. That's part of it. Unrealistic representation makes people feel inadequate. So I guess this is playing into kind of media, social media, and so forth. Wealth inequalities, expected to be always working or contactable, always able to be online, parental care burnout, poor parents, underfunded services, lack of equality, adequate space for moving around. Yeah, I put that in. Any other ideas on this? So this is obviously a factor here with identified around technology and social media. It's kind of well known that this is very much a changing environment. We're living in like this information revolution. We're just over the past 20 years, we've been blasted with information. And now social media is kind of taking that to new levels. And what's the real problem there, do you think? I mean, one person has overstimulation. Do we have any others? Lack of focus. Any other ideas? What's the real issue here in terms of this situation? Mark has the answer for us. Lack of clarity of what matters, how to make sense of things.
I feel like for me, I mean, I don't know if it's the same for the rest of you, but there's kind of a new sense of multitasking being something negative in the last couple of years coming about also before something positive. And I mean, doing parallel tasks or that. So it feels like there's more of, I mean, the trends towards digital detoxes or reducing the amount of apps or screen time or anything that comes also from feels like there's multiple directions of just kind of like of narrowing down, filtering, and kind of both apps and technology, but also social trends pointing to less.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you just got to think about, like, I spend a lot of time online actually working. That's what I've been doing for the past 10 years, working online. And sometimes, you know, I used to work like 12 hours a day online. And I know my feeling at the end of the day, I'd come away feeling very kind of empty and hollow, actually. The experience, the social experience you get with people, even like this, isn't the same, really. And it's not at all the same as dealing with reality, I guess. My experience was coming away with a very kind of hollow, meaningless kind of sense of things, lack of purpose. Yeah, anybody else get that experience?
I do as well. But I wonder, just to play devil's advocate, not, you know, putting the sort of physical science into it. Our younger generations are growing up in a world where they've always had devices, right? I'm of the generation that didn't have a computer until, I won't even say right now, but is it so bad? And it's just a question. Is it so bad that our younger generation, our kids are have access to devices, to technology, because it is moving very quickly in the direction of, you know, engineers and developers today, not just screen time, but also the flip side of like work and development and technology and engineering are garnering higher salaries. I mean, that also goes to career burnout, a career burnout direction too. But I think with our generation, an older one versus a younger one, there might be just different challenges and different social pressures to take into account. So.
Sure. Yeah, and it's that point of what should we be adapting to? I mean, obviously, the human brain is incredibly malleable, and we've learned new things. We've adapted to new ways of life many times over the past thousands of years, and we're doing it again. But how fast can we do it, and what should we be adapting to, and so on and so forth? There's plenty of questions there. Okay, we've just got 20 minutes left, so I'd love to jump into this question of how might we? What can we do in terms of some of these situations? So the ones we had here, you can choose any dimension to this. Go to the outer circle, please. Grab a red sticky. Choose whichever theme you were kind of interested in there, whether that was environmental things around space and exercise, or maybe up here, stuff around inequality and education. There were things over here, yes, again, around employment, capitalism, competition, and so forth. Grab your red sticky and post up and try and connect it back to one of the orange stickies. Yeah, we'll take a good 10 minutes. Let's have a good think about that and try and come up with some innovative ideas here. Okay, I'm going to jump in and take a look at some of these. Just got 10, 12 minutes left. So let's see what we can see. Feel free to stay posting. So over here on social ones, creating more opportunities for people to talk about their experience. So this is tying back to stigma, connecting mental health with perceived weakness. Okay, better spaces for people to talk about their experience. Yeah, and even stuff to help them better understand their experiences too. Like that could be part of the education system, help people better understand psychology and their psychology and how to take care of themselves. So connecting with well-known figures and even facilitating, like in education, we could be facilitating conversations amongst young people about these things so they get used to talking about them and they develop their vocabulary for being able to talk about it. And it doesn't become a stigma. So connecting with well-known figures who are sharing their stories on mental health struggles. Yep. To go on, long-form conversations, long-form podcasts have grown in popularity. Could LFC help people engage in meaningful dialogue? Okay, that's related to limited dialogue. Okay. What else do we have? Ensuring mental health is embedded in healthcare holistically. Yep. So catalyze accessible alternatives for people to switch to new power structures to disempower current structures. Okay, and that's linked to entrenched power structures. All right. So bring school of life type teaching into the school. Yeah, great one. Everyone knows School of Life. They do short videos that educate you about how to live and face all the challenges of life. And they cover mental health quite a bit too, I think. So bringing those into the school would be a really, really good way of doing it. I guess equipping children for the challenges they're going to face in real life, as opposed to calculus, which no one really does anything with except for a few engineers. Okay, I like that one. Anybody else? Who posted this? Do you want to say anything about that, or did I kind of cover it?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what we have: safe spaces and servers. Servers on Discord for mental health support. Yep, spaces for talking about this. Facilitate peer support and conversations. HMW, how might we use more restorative justice practices in legal systems and make them more just? Yep, so that's linking down to inequality, I think, in the legal system down here or way off somewhere. Yeah, limited dialogue. Okay. So what do we have here? How might we create more spaces where people can be vulnerable without fear of repercussions? Include soft skills, training, empathy, conflict resolution at school. Yeah, do you think we do much of this at the moment? Anybody? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure how much we do. Soft skills, empathy, conflict resolution. Yeah, okay, address mental health, mental well-being from birth, redesign childcare, and increase parental leave for men and women. Okay, reform the education system, increase funding to mental health services, improve taxation of the most wealthy, learn how to express emotions healthily. Any ideas on that? How might we do that?
That was from us, me actually.
A team effort.
How might we do that? You need to learn the tools to be able to do that from as young an age as possible, so that you are able to be more resilient, and so that emotions don't sort of build up and then form physical problems or anxiety disorders or whatever else it might be. And yeah, you know, I think someone on the call was saying like all humans face some kind of trauma in one form or another at some point in their life. And usually if you're not able to deal with that in the moment, which is normal, then it's useful to be surrounded by people, or at least to have some tools in place to sort of learn how to be an emotional and not just a emotional being as well. And then to sort of, yeah, but it's about certain tools, I suppose, which someone has to teach you.
Yeah, we've kind of covered it in a few different ways. I mean, I think it's that you've got to, before you can express anything, you've got to understand it. You've got to make sense of it. So people are going to have to learn about what's kind of involved here, but you're also going to have a vocabulary, and you're going to have spaces, and it's going to have to be acceptable for them to talk about those things in those spaces. So that's something you're not going to learn like in 10 hours after you've had your trauma or something. It's something you can have to, a toolkit, as you say, you can have to build up as you're raised in your education and everything. And then you're equipped for it.
The only thing I'd say is that you don't need to always, talking about it only helps so far. And sometimes there are different access points to, rather than talking about it, to help you express from the emotion, even if you don't know what it's called, what to name it or something. So, because that's the only thing, because sometimes it can just also intensify it even more.
So other ways of expressing like physical activity in some form, or like non-verbal?
Yeah, definitely. And that, and theater, and you know, dance and creativity and music and for sure. And also, you know, there are intervention methods that are quite sort of to the point and get, I don't know, it's probably hard to go into it now, but kind of allow you to sort of go on to access the information that was stored in the body and then express from the body, as opposed to going via the cognitive route.
Yep, good point. I'm sure it's kind of physiological expression, but okay. Include mental health training for all educators to build understanding and tolerance. Yeah, okay. So a couple more. So collective long-term impact objectives and plan theory of change. Just doing little experiments. What do we have? We should not expect to have these kinds of conversations on Twitter, identifying catalyzed pockets where dialogue across values sets is happening in a healthy way. Systems for nudging, nonviolent communication, and SNS. Okay. Universal basic income, Web 3.0, blockchain stuff, microeconomies. This is trying to help with the economic inequalities, decentralized data ownership, and more equitable data equity. Okay. And donor economics. So down on the technology side here, what did we have? Have illegal no email after 6 p.m. rule. Have legal no email after 6 p.m. rule, such as certain companies do in the Netherlands. Okay, how might we reform work culture? Always on. Yeah, so how might we use algorithms to recommend content which increases our well-being focus, connect to heart rate variables? How can we start to measure well-being and stress? Force media companies to verify user identity, create social networks and tech that nudge connectedness, belonging, adequate power handling, equal speaking time in zones. Yeah, they're not really kind of measuring quality of these conversations in a way, measuring something different that doesn't really help. Okay, so down here, repurpose underutilized carbon. That was me, to create more space. So finally, on the environmental factors here, urban space to grow food and plants, children's books on climate change, starring the walrus in Tenbai. Okay, great. Empower citizen assemblies to act on climate change. And for people to understand the changes that are coming too, I guess, countries should make meaningful climate action. Okay. And what else here? Studies done on power consumption and how a driving force for reduction was being able to see how you compare to your neighbor, make it easier for consumers to see their real-time consumption of natural resources. Yep. Decentralized production systems. Great. Okay, our time is up. Guys, look at what we created. Pretty amazing, huh? Some people call it a mess, but I think it looks pretty amazing. We surfaced a lot of things there. Anybody, any comments or anything they'd like to say before we wrap up?
If I may, Josh, from the associates, and it's great to kind of have this systems way of looking at things come to life. And I'm always amazed how the technology supports this kind of very complex conversation. So a massive thank you from our gang called today. So thank you.
Well, come alive is right? And all these stickies and all these ideas and all these connections. There's a lot of stuff there. Great. So I'll create a PDF of this actually for anybody who wants it. I'll share it on our network, and Katrina, I can share it with you for your people to take a look at it, so they get something as a takeaway, and it might spark new ideas in the future. I think we kind of explored a lot of dimensions there. It definitely informed me, as I said, about that thing of kind of how broader structure changes in society and economy and so forth actually kind of directly feed into this factor here that we, as Angela was saying, like we often think of it as an individual kind of thing, but it's more kind of a relational thing to do with us and our environment, and those same issues in our environment kind of play out here as well. Okay, Grace, thank you very much for joining, and we'll wrap up for now. I hope to see you all again in the future at some stage. It was a pleasure having the chance to talk with you all about this issue, and yeah. Take care. Have a good one.
Thank you.
It's your nose. It's a nose.